podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
When you're smiling, hey you, bubbly sparkling water is crisp, refreshing, and perfect for any occasion. Kind of like my voice, but in a can. No calories, no sweeteners, all smiles. Bubbly, crack a smile.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Leaving out the avocado in your salad to save money is not good for morale or your fiber intake. Luckily, State Farm knows the value of the little things. It's why they've got options like insuring your home and ride with surprisingly great rates on both. Because you shouldn't have to give up what you love for great insurance. For surprisingly great rates, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or go to statefarm.com for a quote today.
Welcome to another Love Tennis Podlet, where I'm going to start by apologising for a little technical outage over the last 24 hours or so. Many of you may have woken up on Tuesday hoping to listen to our full-length pod that included a look back at Stefano Tsitsipas and Holger Rune's match, a few others from that day, and also a preview of Djokovic versus Nadal. Our platform, which is called Megaphone, they're the people who basically we upload our podcast to their platform and they distribute it to all the places that you get these podcasts. They suffered quite a serious outage. I think it was about 12 hours, and it was really unfortunate for you and for us that it was just the 12 hours when that podcast was scheduled to come out. So I'm sorry if you had any problems playing the podcast. Hopefully they are now all resolved. As far as I know, they have been resolved since about lunchtime UK on Tuesday. So if you do have any problems, I was only really alerted to it. Not that there's anything I could do about it, because someone texted me and said, I think your podcast has been uploaded wrong. And I said, I don't think I've made a mistake. And then went to see if I'd made a mistake. I hadn't. But yeah, apologies for that. I will crack on. It's 3 in the morning here in Paris, and it's 2 in the morning back in the UK, which is why it's just me, no Calvin, no George. I've just literally got home about 5 minutes ago. I've had time to take my shoes off and open a beer, which is really going down very well. It's a Gallia Session IPA. It's a France Bière Challenge Médaille d'Argent, which is a silver medal winner. It's quite tasty. I've got another one in the fridge. I'm sure that'll go down well as well. Let's start at the end. Rafael Nadal beats Novak Djokovic in 4 sets. 6-2, 4-6, 6-2, 7-6. I've been to a few of these matches. You know, the classic rivalries, the Federer Nadals, the Nadal Djokovic's, the Murray Djokovic's. And every time you find yourself pretty quickly running out of words. Because this kind of baseline era, which describes the majority of it, at least in terms of Nadal, Djokovic and Murray, Federer obviously being a little bit different, the matches have such a sort of titanic feel to them that it really is the only word you can find yourself really using. Epic, mammoth, marathon, and all of those words really applied to this match. It wasn't just that it took 4 hours and 12 minutes, which it did. And it wasn't just that it finished at 1:15 a.m. local time, which it did. It was just the points. The very points that they were playing felt so exhausting. When you started to think about what was going through both of their heads, you know, it's a question that often gets asked in press conferences. What was going through your head at this point? What was going through your head at this point? At some points, those players, Novak Djokovic said you don't want to know, because he was having some very dark and angry thoughts about how he was playing. But at one point, I found myself watching one of these mammoth rallies and just breaking down every time one of them hit the ball, what they're trying to achieve. Because it's not just, right, I'm going to hit this topspin cross-court forehand into his backhand and then we'll see where we go from there. You're always thinking about your match plan, what you know his match plan will be, what he's done the previous 58 times you've played him, how that's usually turned out, whether you think he's fit or not, whether you think he's going to do this, that and the other. There's so much I've only ever really come across this in poker, but metagame, which is the game within the game just between the two of you, not just the game that you are playing, i.e. tennis. There's so much history that they always talk about that it must turn it into a complete level. You're just trying to think, what level's he on? How good does he think I am? Does he know that I can do this? Does he know that I might do that? And it was absolutely fascinating. For the first set and a half, Nadal was imperious. I mean, we know what Nadal can do. We know that Roland Garros is his place. We talked a lot before about how playing at night might not suit him in the cooler, heavier conditions, because his topspin forehand wouldn't have the same fizz. It would be easier to deal with. It wouldn't be bouncing up so high. I feel like he adjusted for that a little bit. He seemed to flatten the ball out a little bit in that first set. His forehand was still extremely potent in that opening set. I think he hit 12 winners in a set and 10 of them were forehands. I know he's obviously famous for his forehand and not really his backhand, but it was impressive the way he would open up the court for that shot. Against someone who traditionally it's very hard to open up the court against. Djokovic, conversely, and so often these tennis matches, when we sit down and think about them, are about trying to work out who was playing well and who was playing badly, and trying to work out to what extent that person was playing well, or quite simply they were just being given the opportunity to by the fact the other was playing badly. I think Djokovic gave Nadal a lot of opportunities. His first serve percentage in that first set was really low. I think it was 48%, which is, unless you're serving absolute bombs and every single one of those points you win, which by the way he wasn't, even then that's not necessarily a sustainable strategy. He missed first serve on the first 4 break points that he faced. He was broken on 2 of them, and it made such a difference. There was one break point later on in the set where he made first serve, and he didn't hit the winner until 5 or 6 shots down the line, but the whole rally was his because he had made that first serve. I don't know what that comes down to. He didn't speak much in press afterwards, and certainly not about that. He's obviously not had lots of competitive match practice this year, and if Calvin were here, I'm absolutely sure that he would say you can't substitute that. He is someone who says he likes competitive match practice, and he's also someone, well, I think like everyone, you don't know what your body's going to do until you put yourself through it. And if you've not done it for a while, as he hasn't, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get out of it. And in that first, 11 games, 9 of which he lost, I really didn't think I was watching the same Djokovic. He was placid. He was a bit passive in the way he was playing. He was being absolutely bullied by Rafa Nadal, quite frankly. And he hasn't played probably in a match of that intensity, I would suggest, since the US Open final, which was obviously a hugely intense match for because he was going for the calendar year slam, and you saw what happened to him when the crowd started chanting his name and he was sat down in the final changeover. That was incredibly emotional and intense match. But since then, yeah, sure. I mean, he won the title in Paris, and that, I guess, was a big deal of sorts. And, he went to tour finals and got to the semis there, and then everything with Australia. But I just think he just hadn't had those matches, the like of those matches. All of his matches in previous rounds have been very straightforward. He had 1 tiebreak, but he's not dropped a set to this point. So he just hasn't got that real intensity to him. I suppose he won the title in Rome, but it's a little bit different. It's not the same as having 20,000 or 1,000 people mostly cheering against you. And what I found weird, and they were cheering against him for the most part, what I found weird was that he didn't seem to use that, positively. Anyone who read the piece I did with John McEnroe earlier in the week about McEnroe said that he found it very hard to use that energy positively, but that Novak does it better than anyone else, and almost all the time. What I found weird today is that he didn't, as you sometimes see, Murray does it quite often, where you'll just see him decide that he's going to get angry or something, or going to focus on something and use that to wind him up. And it's the same, Tsitsipas said about Holger Rune, he's someone who plays like he's got a problem all the time, like something's up. And I think Djokovic is at his best when something's up. And that first set and a half, and he obviously came back and he won the second set. He fought back tremendously. But you're working from a big, you're working from 10 yards behind. So you've got to play 10 yards better than your opponent to make up for that slow start. The game at 3-2 in the second set, where Djokovic had gone 3-love down, having already been a set down, and it kind of looked like the match might just disappear and we would all be in bed quite early, which wouldn't have been completely unwelcome. It just didn't. The first game of that set was 13 minutes on the Djokovic serve, and he was broken. And Nadal then held to love and then broke him again. And then you've got this epic game at 2-3 when Djokovic has just broken back for the first time and then held quickly. And then this 15-minute game in which Nadal got as tight as I've ever seen him. Now, I know that Nadal gets tight, but boy, was he tight. I mean, at one point, he was bouncing the ball on the service line. He just dropped it. He dropped it and nutmegged himself, and the ball boy had to come and get it and give it to him. And it was just like, gee, this is real pressure on Nadal. And then he double faulted at deuce as well, and got himself out of trouble with a classic winner, really. But he felt it so much. And he did say he saved, I think, 4 break points, one with a cracking ace. He didn't hit many of those these days. But eventually it told, and Djokovic broke back to make it 3-all. And then once Djokovic had won that second set, I think Calvin said in our Love Tennis WhatsApp group, that's that. It's a shame this match is over now. Because, and I think we all agreed, just as we all agreed that Djokovic would win in the first place. But Nadal just found another level. Djokovic noted that he started every set really well, which I don't know if that's a coincidence or deliberate or what, but I always think these great players do start well. Apologies for the drinking noises. This beer really is just lovely, and I'm trying to keep myself sane. And then, we came to the end of the match. Frankly, Djokovic served for the fourth set, which would have taken us to a fifth, and in his words, then it's anybody's. And Nadal broke him. He's just like that. He's so incredibly clutch that he breaks at 5-4 when you're serving for the set. And, it wasn't like it was a long break, but it wasn't like he had lots of break point opportunities. Like, I think he had one, and then Djokovic produced a brilliant winner on a long rally, and then Nadal found it. And his level of aggression in that game was so much higher. Like, there had been a lot of long rallies in the match up to that point, but he kind of took things into his own hands a little bit more, and he did step up the aggression. Interestingly, if you look at the 0-4, the 5-8, and the 9+ rallies, Nadal dominated all of them. He was 8 more than Djokovic on the 0-4, 3 more than Djokovic on the 5-8, and 7 more than Djokovic on the 9+. I would suggest that 9+ stat is a lot as well, because there were a total of 75 rallies of 9 shots or more, which is just insane when you think about it. I mean, as usual, the numbers these guys put up are just ridiculous. But yeah, he and then he played a brilliant tiebreak. He really did. He went 3-love up quickly, hit a couple of winners, forced a couple of Djokovic unforced errors, and then he was 6-1 up all of a sudden, and he blew 3 match points, and then opened up the court and punched a backhand winner onto the baseline, and that was that. I mean, it was pretty remarkable, actually. I've obviously never seen Nadal play at Roland Garros in the flesh before these 2 weeks, and yeah, it was pretty special, actually. The noise in that stadium, even though it was 1 a.m, it was blimmin' cold. I mean, I think it was probably only about 12 degrees, but you've obviously been sat there for 4 hours and getting colder and colder, and it was quite breezy as well. And yeah, like, credit to the crowd, most of them stayed to the end. Like, that was quite something. And then, yeah, gets over the line. He talked afterwards quite candidly about his foot, as he has previously. He said something that made me think he's almost certainly not going to be at Wimbledon. You know, he said, I'm not going to hide things, but I'm also not going to come here and say a thing that I don't believe. I just don't necessarily want to talk about it lots. I'm going to be playing this tournament because we're doing the things to be ready to play this tournament, but I don't know what's going to happen after here. I have what I have here in the foot. If we're not able to find an improvement or a small solution on that, then it becomes super difficult for me. So that's it. And that made me think, you know, Rafa playing Wimbledon is always a bit of a crapshoot anyway, but I think if it's really as bad as he says it is, I think he will be resting for the US Open rather than coming and playing on grass. But I don't know. I mean, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's my instinct anyway. Let's move on, shall we, to the other men's match today. I was on court for that as well. Alexander Zverev against Carlos Alcaraz. Pretty interesting match, really. The first, just because of what we learned about Carlos Alcaraz, which is that he is human. John McEnroe, for me, summed it up best. He said, it's the first time we've seen Alcaraz look his age. I thought that was spot on. He looked really lost. You know, he took him 30 games to get a break of serve. You know, he nicked the third set, and I say nicked because he broke at, what was it, 4-5? Or, yeah, exactly, to take the set. So he didn't even have to serve it out. And, you know, it felt like he had one plan and he didn't necessarily know what to do when that plan failed. You know, he fought, and he said that was one thing I can take away from this, is that I fought, and I fought to the end. And, you know, when Zverev served for the match at 5-4 in the fourth, he broke him back, you know, brilliantly. There was pretty much a return winner and then a clean winner off the sort of +1. And, you know, he showed a lot in that match, in adversity. And sometimes I think that I learn, it's a cliche to say you learn more out of adversity than success, but I think one learns more about a player when they lose in terms of how they lose. You know, we're not surprised to see a 19-year-old kid look a bit lost on court, but sometimes you are surprised when you see them not give it away. And, you know, he saved match points multiple times. He went to 9-7 in that final tiebreak, and, you know, it pains me to give any credit to Alexander Zverev, but he did show a lot of guts, and, you know, he will be a tough opponent for Rafael Nadal. I'm really sorry about that yawn. It's very late. I'm going to move on to the women. I'm going to end up basically spending this whole podcast having talked about Nadal and Djokovic, but I think that's reasonable because it's most fresh in my mind, and it was epic. Since we're going backwards, let's go to Gauff and Stevens. A really good match, this. Not quite the sort of venom to the shot making that you'd necessarily like, but certainly it was creative and there was a decent level to it, I think. You know, Gauff and Stevens met the US Open last year, and Gauff lost quite comfortably. So from the perspective of, we kind of want to see Coco Gauff at the top of the women's game because she's a superstar and lots of people know who she is and she speaks really well. Delighted to see her make that improvement. And she said it herself. She said that the quarterfinal against Krejcikova last year really hurt, and that she learned a lot from that, and that she wasn't going to let it happen again. And I think it was a ding-dong match, and probably because of that, you know, I think she broke Stevens' serve 6 times in all, and she was broken a couple of times herself. and I think that would have been emotionally quite challenging as a match. That's very up and down. There's lots going on there. And, she served the match and got broken, which is always a painful thing. And actually, fortunately, she then broke the very next game to seal it. So I think there's a lot to be said. This is a massive learning kind of tournament for Coco Gauff. And I was really impressed by her. All right, Sloane Stephens isn't the best player in the world, and she's not seeded, and she hadn't won in 5 when she came to Roland Garros, but she did get to the quarterfinals, so she was doing something right. There are still some concerns with Gauff, there were 6 double faults I think she served today, which clearly is a little bit of a concern. And there were a pretty sizable number of unforced errors, albeit fewer than Stephens, but that is still something that you'd want to cut out. I think she has got an awful lot to her game. I don't think she can beat Swiatek, but I'd like to think she can have a good go. And then finally, Martina Trevisan upsetting Leylah Fernandez. Now, it looked like an upset at the time. People said to me on Twitter, she's injured, she's on one leg. Of course, Leylah Fernandez is losing. Well, she won a second set tiebreak on one leg, so she can't have been that injured. Albeit, she said, she was supposed to come in for press afterwards, and then it was announced that her press engagements were cancelled because the medical team had said her injury was too severe. It was a right foot injury. I don't want to be cynical about it. If you've got a right foot injury that is so severe that you can't come and do press, then that must be really damn serious, or you really don't want to do press. Because, let's face it, she said she felt it before the match. They sent through some flash quotes. And, she played through it. So, I don't know. I'm not casting aspersions. I'm just saying I don't really understand this injury wholly. And I guess I'm trying to be optimistic, actually, in a weird way. I hope it's not that bad, because I think Leylah Fernandez is great, and I think I want her playing as much as possible. I'd love to see her on the grass, but I don't know how likely that is now if that's a really bad injury. So Trevisan Gauff in that semi-final. I think Gauff will take care of her. Don't get me wrong, Trevisan played really well and is a good player. George will tell you how good she is because he has been backing her for a while. She's got a great forehand, and she did show nerves. She wasn't hugely clutch. She did serve for the match in the second set and got broken, and eventually got over the line in the third. But we'll forgive her that. It's only a second Grand Slam quarter-final, and she lost the first one 2 years ago. So maybe grounds for nerves. Just briefly looking ahead to tomorrow. It's a little bit of a dead day to a certain extent. Kudermetova against Kasatkina, the all-Russian semi-finals first up, followed by Iga Świątek against Jessica Pegula. I've listed this as my upset watch because I think it's the most likely upset in the day. I don't think it's terribly likely. Jessica Pegula is a good player. She has beaten Świątek before, but that was in 2019. And I just think that the 2019 Świątek is basically a completely different person and player. So there were signs. I think if Zheng Qinwen had stayed fit or well, then I think she might have beaten her. So there's definitely an opportunity there, but I don't know. I can't really see it. We're then going to go to Rublev-Cilic. It's a match I think Cilic might actually win. Rublev not playing brilliantly, let off the hook massively by Yannick Sinner's injury. Struggled against Christian Garin, which Garin's a good player and he's a hard guy to play on clay. So, I wouldn't take too much from that. But nevertheless, I think Cilic got a great chance. He's playing brilliantly and he blew Medvedev away. And then finally, Rune Ruud, the all-Scandinavian clash. Which I think will be an exciting one. I think Ruud will win. But, they're both players worth watching and players who will feature at this stage of Roland Garros again one day. Thanks very much for listening. I apologise if I'm not being word perfect because it is now 3:30 here in Paris. We'll hopefully be back tomorrow at a slightly more reasonable hour to talk about everything that's happened there and also look forward to the women's semi-finals, which we will have decided by then. But in the meantime, take care and thank you for listening.
Sports Social Podcast Network.